Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Sian Beilock, and I'm the president of Barnard College, and this is such a special occasion. Although I wish we could all be here safely in person, I'm happy to have so many of you here virtually tonight, and also to be able to include those who don't live close to campus. We're here tonight to celebrate and to join in now what has become an annual event, Beyond the Game. And it's really to celebrate our incredible Columbia Barnard Athletic Consortium and to honor Women's History Month in the process. Not bad to be able to kill two birds with one stone there, really exciting. Since I'm president of Barnard College, I get to brag a little bit about our school and what we do. And I just want to say that there's no institution like the one I get to lead. There's absolutely no institution in the country or in the world that's devoted to empowering young women to pursue their passions, combined with this tight-knit, supportive community with the vast academic resources of a large research institution. Then on top of that, you have so many wonderful things in terms of a world-class faculty dedicated to teaching, but focused on their research and tenured at Barnard and Columbia, and the infinite opportunities of New York City. And then what I think is one of the most special aspects of what you get through a Barnard education is our relationship to Columbia and our really being part of this athletic consortium. The consortium is so unique. It brings Barnard students and Columbia undergraduates together to compete as members of university-wide athletic teams. It was established in 1983, and it elevated Barnard athletes to Division I status, making us the only college focused on women in the country to compete at this level. And I'm so proud to be part of this amazing organization and so proud that our athletes are part of this consortium and get to compete at the highest levels on 16 different teams. As you might have guessed, from my excitement, I'm an athlete myself, and I can attest to the importance of sports in an experience that one has at college and beyond. Being part of a team teaches cooperation, diligence, it teaches responsibility, and one of the things that I think is so important for success in college and in one's career moving forward is resilience, learning how to get up after failure. Our student athletes have every reason to be proud, and they not only excel in the playing field, but on the classroom as well. This event is a true testament to the fact that athletics, of course, goes beyond the playing field. As we all know, it's been a hard past year for athletics, and our students haven't been able to compete at the highest level as part of the Ivy League. It's been disappointing, but the fact that they've been able to continue to be together in spirit and also with their teams is such a special part of the Barnard Columbia Athletic Consortium, and it's so important for our student athletes. So even as competition is paused, we get to come together and speak about the importance of athletics. We'll hear from Megan Griffith on what the women's basketball team has been doing. We'll hear from our alumni, and we'll hear from people who are really focused on women's sports and leadership. And I'm proud to say that since I arrived at Barnard almost 4 years ago now in 2017, we've really worked hard to increase the connections between Barnard and Columbia and really increase the value of this consortium. And I just wanted to mention a couple of things, and you can really see it in the numbers. We've gone from a few years ago in 2018 with only 3 recruits coming into Barnard, and this year for the class of 2025 for early decision alone, we have 10 recruits and 4 walk-ons. We have 44 athletes now competing on 16 teams at Columbia through Barnard, and I want to really thank Peter Pilling, who's Columbia's director of Intercollegiate Athletics, for all that he does for our athletes and for helping us really cement what is such an important relationship. Peter, it's been wonderful to work with you over these past several years. We're grateful to the work you and Jackie Blanket do as part of supporting our student athletes. And we're delighted to host this event as really a symbol of Barnard and Columbia coming together around our athletics. And I know this evening's discussion is going to be engaging and really affirm our collective strength in athletics. I'm looking forward to hearing from our panelists. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, Peter. And now I would like to turn this virtual stage over to you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sian. Grateful for your leadership and grateful for your partnership. As you mentioned, we're incredibly appreciative of the opportunity we have to partner with this Beyond the Game initiative and around this webinar. And we're grateful for the panelists that were able to join us. It's a great opportunity to celebrate women's sports and their amazing contributions to society. And we're especially grateful for the leadership that you provide at Barnard and the role Virginia Ryan plays and so many other administrators at Barnard in terms of enabling our student athletes to reach a new level from a perspective of opportunities. And as you mentioned before, the increase in admission supports has had an incredible impact on our athletic department, both from a Title IX perspective and then just opportunity on our women's teams to excel. As many of you know, our 2019 fencing team won the national championship. This was our 16th national championship, and it was especially exciting for Barnard because we had an individual NCAA champion in Ann who won the championship in epee, and it was great. It was great to continue to see the fruits of our labors and the success that our student athletes are having and all the things that they do and how they represent each of the respective institutions. So Sian, thank you. We look forward to future success. We obviously look forward to getting back in the field of competition. This has been a trying time. We're grateful for our coaches. We're especially grateful for our student athletes that have faced some truly indeed challenging times through this pandemic, but we're thankful for their resiliency and we're grateful for their commitment to our institutions for all that they do to represent both Barnard and Columbia. And so we look forward to the fall with optimism, and let's hope we can get back to the field of competition and really display the success that we have both academically and academically. Obviously during this pandemic, we've had limited opportunities to participate in phase athletic activities, but our student athletes have done a remarkable job excelling in the classroom, and we're incredibly grateful for that and all of our support staff. It's enabled them to do them. So thank you. We're grateful for the opportunity we have to join you at this time. It's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Juliet Macur, who is a Barnard 1992 graduate and former captain of the rowing team. We're thankful for the role that she plays. As many of you know, she's an award-winning columnist for the New York Times. And it was interesting, I looked at my email because I remember that somebody had sent me an article that she wrote, and I tracked it down today, and it was an article that she wrote about her father and the role that he played in terms of her career and the impact that he had on her individual life. And it was really remarkable. So I would just encourage everybody to Google that. It was called The Father's Love of Sport Inspires a Daughter's Career. So it's now my pleasure, Juliet, to turn it over to you, and thank you for leading this discussion tonight.
Oh, thanks. It's my pleasure. It's funny that you mentioned my dad because I was going to mention my mom in this intro. My dad played such a big role in supporting me as a young athlete when way back then a lot of dads really didn't. But today I wanted to thank everybody for coming here. As you know, International Women's Day was yesterday, so this is I think it's really good timing for this event just to celebrate women's sports both in the pandemic and out. It's my mom's birthday, so I wanted to wish her happy birthday. And the last time I hosted a sports panel at Barnard, she was in the audience, and she's watching today. So happy birthday, Mom. And I wanted to thank Peter Pilling and President Beilock for hosting this event and for supporting this bond that Columbia has with Barnard athletes and vice versa. It allowed me to row for 3 years at Columbia, and being a part of the Columbia crew team and Columbia athletics has really almost defined my career. Without Columbia crew, I'm not sure if I'd be as tough of a journalist as I am today. I honestly think when things are really difficult at work, I think it's, we're up many days, no sleeping, travel all over the world. I think back to the days when I was at Barnard, waking up at 5:45 in the morning to roll out into a van, which we had to drive up to the top of Manhattan to row on the Harlem River for a few hours to rush back for our 9 a.m. calculus exam or something like that. So I think back to those days and think, my life is not as hard as I would think it is now. It's pretty easy now compared to being an athlete at Columbia. But it's one of the best things I've ever done in my life. I especially like to thank President Beilock for being such a supporter of women's athletics and realizing that and emphasizing that the pursuit of athletics is so important in the success of someone's life. And I can say that not every college president thinks that way. And so I really appreciate her athletics programs since she's come to Barnard 4 years ago now. We're here tonight on Zoom because it's such a weird year for sports, for everybody. It's been such a unique year. Looking back this week, last year is when all of sports sort of came to a screeching halt. So the NCAA tournament was canceled, the NBA was canceled, then soccer, then youth sports, and all the schools closed, and really life took a turn this week last year. And we have these great panelists today, and I'll introduce them in a second, who could describe what this all means, what this last year has meant to women in sports and girls in sports. How should we handle it? How did we handle it? And I'll introduce them by alphabetical order. We have Dr. Deborah Antoine, who's the CEO of the Women's Sports Foundation. She has spent 4 decades in sports, culminating with her position at the Women's Sports Foundation in January of 2017. As an educator, strategic planner, team builder, entrepreneur, her career has focused on designing, developing, and implementing programs to improve the lives of underserved children and families. She has successfully led the growth and sustainability of 5 other nonprofit organizations and is a recipient of a number of awards, including, most recently, CEO of Distinction from Smart CEO magazine, and Most Notable Woman in Sports from Forbes. Most dear to her is the 2020 Distinguished Alumna Award from Teachers College, yay, where Dr. Antoine earned her doctoral degree in 1991. She has a long record of voluntary service to education, the arts, and human services, including RX Compassion, which she co-founded with her husband, Dr. Clarel Antoine. Dr. Antoine is the mother of 3 daughters and 5 grandchildren who are all athletes, not surprisingly. She's also an athlete. She plays tennis and was awarded Tennis Woman of the Year from the USTA Eastern section, and has reached a top 10 ranking in her age group. Dr. Antoine credits her accomplishments to the great mentors John Stuckey and to tennis legend, who we all know, Billie Jean King. Our second panelist is someone people at Columbia and Barnard should know, Megan Griffith. She's a 2007 graduate of Columbia College. She's in her 5th season as head coach of Columbia women's basketball. The year before she arrived, the team went 1-15, which is kind of daunting to think about. But Megan turned the program around, spending 3 seasons building and recruiting talent before leading the Lions to a historical 2019-2020 campaign that included an overall record of 17-10, an Ivy League record of 8-6, and the team's first ever qualification in the Ivy League basketball tournament. Columbia's 17 overall wins and 8 Ivy League wins were each the team's most in a decade. Its 6-game Ivy League winning streak was the longest in program history and secured its berth in the postseason. In Griffith's short tenure, Columbia has hit several program milestones, including winning its first game against ACC and Big East opponents and having 2 players named Metropolitan Basketball Writers Association Rookie of the Year and 1 named Player of the Year. Our third panelist, who I always wanted to meet when I was at Barnard and Columbia. I've never met her, but when I showed up on campus in 1998, her name was all over the place, all over the athletic department. Ula Lysniak is a legend in Morningside Heights. In 2006, she was inducted into the Columbia Athletics Hall of Fame, and for good reason. She was the first Columbia woman to score 1,000 points in her career, finishing with a total of 1,447 points. It's a record that stood 30 years until broken by Camille Zimmerman in 2017. She also recorded 764 career rebounds and started in every single game for 4 years. After graduating from Barnard in 1987, Lysniak became the first Columbia women's basketball player to play professionally when she signed with Union Basketball Club of Salzburg, Austria. She also nearly earned an Olympic medal at the 1996 Olympics as an assistant coach for the Ukrainian women's basketball team that reached the bronze medal game before losing to Australia. Now, Lysniak has in education and is an associate professor at Bronx Community College, the City University, developer and coordinator of exercise science and kinesiology program in health, physical education, and recreation department. Her research focuses on low-skilled students, combating inequity of skill, and attaining physical skills and social justice. But as you might guess, her athletic career has not ended. She has run more than 40 marathons and is qualified for the last 14 Boston marathons, which is quite an accomplishment. And frankly, I'm not surprised that she's still doing these things. So the question I wanted to pose to all of you right now, which is the reason why we're talking about this pause and play, is where were you when the lights went out last year? Where were you when everything started to stop, things started to cancel, and what was your initial thought about whether it was your own personal worries about your team or your students or your players? Just let's put us in the moment and tell us what it was like for you. Let's see, Dr. Antoine, would you like to begin?
I would love to begin. Thank you, Juliet. I actually thought, when I think back, March 12th, 2020 was the day that changed everything for me and the Women's Sports Foundation. So as I join you 1 year later, which is so hard to believe, isn't it? I thought I might open this evening by just going back and looking at my calendar at the weeks that preceded March 12th, 2020, when my life was normal. And I think it will also give you some context of what the kind of work that the Women's Sports Foundation does. As CEO of the Women's Sports Foundation, with a mission to be the advocate and the ally for all girls, for all women in all sports, I was doing all the things that you would expect a leader of a nonprofit to be doing. On February 4th, 2020, we're talking about, I hosted a convening of thought leaders in Washington, D.C. from around the country. We shared the results of a recent research report called Chasing Equity, the Triumphs, Challenges, and Opportunities in Sports. And we brainstormed an action plan to accelerate the pace of change. On February 6th, I hosted our Board of Trustees meeting in DC to coincide with National Girls and Women in Sport Day, where more than 300 organizations around the country celebrate with sporting activities, and where our stakeholders, including our trustees, gather on Capitol Hill to advocate for equitable policies and to keep Title IX strong. On that day, we invited our trustees to see our community work firsthand. As part of that work, we provide cash grants, curriculum, and other resources to community organizations around the country that serve girls. And several of those programs were based in DC, and we held a convening with them at Georgetown University, where the girls got to sample different sports. And then they met with what we call our athlete ambassadors, just several hundred athletes who serve as ambassadors for the girls we serve. And that day, it includes Asia Evans, Alana Nichols, and Sarah Hughes, who I remember Sarah talked not only about her job now as a lawyer, but she also passed around her gold medal for every girl to touch and hold for a moment. And moving right along, on February 26th, I was out in San Francisco to meet with a donor who was interested in learning more about our Tara Vanderveer Fund for the Advancement of Women in Coaching. It's based on our research that talked about the decline in women coaching. And the fund provides mentoring and financial assistance to aspiring coaches. And yes, I was thrilled when the donor said yes to our request for a $100,000 grant. On February 26th, I on that same day in San Francisco, the mayor of San Francisco declared a state of emergency, stressing that this was just about preparedness, just to combat coronavirus if it comes. So on February 28th, I flew to Tampa for the largest flag football tournament in the country, sponsored by the Buccaneers. And there I met Mayor Jane Castor, who inspired the girls with her story of being the first female police chief, crediting her work ethic to the lessons she learned on the court. And actually it was two courts, volleyball and basketball, for which she was inducted into the University of Tampa Hall of Fame. An honor to be sitting across from all of my two panelists, also Hall of Famers. And on March 4th, at an inaugural meeting of the Michigan Task Force, my team went to East Lansing. And on March 6th, International Women's Day, we launched the Equity Project. And then suddenly, the danger and the fear became real and palpable. I remember gathering my staff in the conference room on March 12th and announced our decision to shut down. It felt like a fire drill. We left most of our personal belongings, never imagining we'd be gone for long. And then a cascade of more bad news. And by the end of the month, my own personal battle with COVID-19, it became urgently clear that this was a fire drill. It was real, and we needed to respond. So that's the context of how the year started.
Wow, that's quite you have probably a very thick schedule, or I'm guessing thicker than mine with all these trips and business meetings. Ula, were you in class at the time, or were you, where were you on those couple of days?
Yeah, no, I was in class. First, I just want to say thank you to Barnard College, to President Beilock, to Peter Pilling, and to Virginia Ryan for this invitation. And it's really an honor to be here with my fellow panelists, and as well as with all of Barnard's close friends that are attending this panel. But I was in class. It was actually March 11th, I believe, that we were let out. And this pandemic has been a pause. It's been a hard pause. As a professor in exercise science and kinesiology, I am constantly engaged, with my students in the gym, with weights and aerobic equipment, in fitness exercises. So this loss of physical engagement, which has occurred, has been very challenging, especially for the students. We went remote, as I said, in March 2020. And then we had to work really hard to keep students engaged, despite the fact that academics, the fitness instruction, the fitness training, all had to be done virtually. And my role while living through this pandemic has been to keep my students inspired and encouraged to succeed in their courses. And that hasn't always been very easy to do during this time. In fact, just this week, I found out that one of my students, another student, just got COVID. So this is still something that is going on. Our students, as everyone, were having a difficult time being basically quarantined at home. Many did not find it comfortable at all to leave home. This resulted in the amount of physical activity that one was getting on a daily basis to really decrease. And unfortunately, my ability to explain the importance of attending to fitness, whether it be aerobic or strength training, became easier because all one has to do is to look at themselves: weight gain, loss of fitness, and most importantly, a decrease in muscle mass. And when you have muscle mass loss, that means you're burning fewer calories, so you could eat the same and you still can gain fat weight. And this has been occurring across the nation and across all age groups. And it's all from a decrease in exercise, not being able to go to the gym, and unfortunately spending 24 hours a day being very near your refrigerator. So, with my courses, I did a 180 to not focus my teaching on dumbbells and barbells and weight equipment and treadmills and elliptical machines, but on calisthenics, that's using your own body weight to do resistance training, and aerobic exercises that can be done at home in a small space. A studio apartment is enough space for a full workout. And that really benefited my students by having, to look at this new way of teaching in our lives now. I I really have used this hard pause to my advantage, and therefore have grown as a professor. And this is something that I will be utilizing in the future, you know, when I teach future classes. So that's been sort of my experience with everything.
I'm sure, Megan, you're thinking, you know, it's sort of your same story, right? That you had to deal with not only students, but athletes who were they actually, were your players in the middle of a game when things started shutting down, or what was, I mean, for them too, it's, you know, the Ivy League was the first to decide that they wouldn't have the NCAA tournament. And I'm sure thinking back, we can all think back as athletes that, you know, you want to be first, you would like to be first, but you don't want to be the first person to sort of quit on that, right? I wonder what that was like, and what, you know, just how you dealt with it as a coach, or what the initial reaction was, and where your athletes were when they heard that their season was done.
Yeah, so it was similar to everybody. There was an immense amount of shock that took place. We had just finished our last regular season game. So we ended on March 7th at home, and we played Princeton that night. It was senior night. For everybody that doesn't know what a senior night is, essentially it's you honor your senior members of your team on their last home game. So we had, you know, you just come off an emotional weekend, and we finished well, but, you know, there was unfinished business, and we had qualified for the first time to be in the postseason. And it was really exciting. So, you know, going into it, we knew our matchup, we knew what seed we were. It's Monday, Sunday, you're heavy film. Like, for anybody that's ever coached a sport before, you watch so much film during the season, like you're just in the weeds, like all the time. So I think, you know, we had some awareness that COVID was happening. There was talk of COVID. It was mainly on the West Coast at that time. And, you know, we just weren't sure. There wasn't a lot of that was happening directly, especially in New York City yet. And Tuesday morning, we practice, it starts around 10:15. And I had been speaking with Peter all morning, and he shot me a message early that morning just saying, hey, heads up, something's happening. Let's stay in touch. Like, so all morning I'm frantically checking my phone. You've heard rumblings. Is this going to happen? Are we going to play this weekend? The Ivy tournament was set to begin that weekend in Boston up at Harvard. And so it's 10:05 and I haven't heard from Peter. And, you know, you're with your staff. We're thinking full steam ahead. What's our game plan? We have all these things we're going to do and schemes. And then I walked over to his office, knocked on his door, and that was how I found out. So it kind of happened. It was like a avalanche. It just all came down, and he was like, well, let's go tell the team. And I was like, I think I need to tell our staff first. So I gathered my staff together, and we sat in my office for probably too long, just not knowing what to say to each other. And then, you know, just to be able to deliver that news to your team is gut wrenching. So, and Peter was the one that delivered the news. So I know for him, it was even, we were just talking about today, it's a year from tomorrow that the date of March 10th that we found out. So the 2 days later was when when the March Madness was called, when everything sort of shut down with the NBA to college athletics to middle school athletics to every level, right? Everything started to shut down pretty quickly after that. But it was just a wide range of emotions, but what you felt the most was for your student athletes, especially your seniors in that moment. And I'll never forget that embrace. We had one senior, her name was Janiyah Clemens, and had a fantastic career here. And then just, you know, to look at her and hug her and not know what to say. And it was hard. It was very hard. And at the same time, you knew that it must have been something serious was happening, and you had to take it at that face value and not second guess too many things.
And did they understand, or what did they think about their tournament being canceled first? Or did they say, can we just wait? Or can we be second, or can we be last? Or, you know, what was that? I'm sure there was I'm just guessing that there was some maybe anger there, or, you know, a little bit, you know, sadness, but also like, what the hell, you know, why us first?
I mean, yes, it was everything. I think every emotion, frustration, anger. I think there was a little bit of course the Ivy League did this, right? And not to bash our league, but it's just, you know, we know the importance that we place on the student athlete and not just the athlete in the Ivy League. And, you know, there was a lot of things that were unanswered. Well, okay, can we do this? Like, we thought up of every scenario. The Ivy office thought of every possible scenario. Let's just play a game at Princeton. We'll go there. We'll drive there, like down and back, like no issues, no overnight. I mean, literally everything, you know, and the senior student athletes across the league actually formed together a petition and got each other to sign it. And, you know, I was really proud of them for, you know, we want to support their thoughts and opinions and make sure that they're heard. So I was proud that they bonded together over that, which I think created some camaraderie across the league a little bit. But, you know, then when you saw everything else shutting down, it was very sobering that, again, this was bigger than the league. This was bigger than just basketball.
Ula, for your students, when did they realize just how serious things were and they'd be stuck in their apartments and houses with their parents for the next year, especially in New York City where things got bad and, you know, it wasn't like some other parts of the country. I mean, it was a serious lockdown. So as things unfolded, just what were you hearing from your students and sort of how did you get through those first couple of weeks of realizing what they were facing?
Yeah, we were not prepared. The biggest thing was we were not prepared to teach online. That was the biggest problem. So when we were released on the 11th, after that, it was just, okay, you've got 5 days off for the faculty, and then you have to get, you know, on board and start teaching online. For the students, I mean, just like Deborah mentioned, and for us, I think we kind of left everything where it was. We didn't really think we were not coming back, or at least not coming back within a certain time frame. But then once we were at home and you started to see, again, you see what's going on in the world and you see how things are not getting better, they're actually getting worse. So students started to realize that they have to do this work online. And what was difficult was we didn't necessarily have Zooms set up. We use Blackboard as our it's a program that we use. We use Blackboard as this platform. It's a platform, and it wasn't set up to do the Blackboard Collaborate, where we actually have people face to face. People didn't know how to use all this. Students didn't know how to use it. So there was this huge learning curve done in that whole semester. It was 7 weeks. We were right in the middle of the year, and it was a lot of phone calls to students. It was a lot of emails to students, and we lost a lot of students. That was the worst thing. We lost a lot of them, meaning they just dropped out of school, not lost as in anything other, but they dropped out of school because it was too difficult to follow along. That was really the difficult parts.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd like to do is try to turn the conversation into, where do you go from there? You know, as female athletes, I'd like to think that we're more resilient than the normal people, you know, regular humans. Deborah, I know that the Women's Sports Foundation had specific concerns with just how many girls maybe would drop out of sports, you know, if they're not in high school or they're not in school, you know, they don't have access to the outdoors. I'm wondering what your concerns were initially when it came to girls' participation in sports and how you rebounded or how you decided to work it in the move it in the right direction.
Yeah, well, what we feared most was the well-being of our girls. So many of them already in under-resourced communities. And without access to sport and physical activity and their camaraderie of their teammates, girls were much more likely to feel increasingly isolated, to stay mentally fit and physically active. We know the connection of those things. For many of our girls, sport is a literal lifeline. With all of those positive impacts that we started with the program with, that we all understand, and taking that away was very, very scary. When you add to that we know that girls start sports at lower rates than boys, and we know that they drop out of sports at greater rates of boys, particularly in the middle school years. So their continued play and engagement is critical. And we worry about steep participation declines. So we had to, as Billie Jean King likes to say, pressures of privilege and champions adjust. And so what could we do to adjust? How could we best serve the many thousands of girls in our network? So the first thing we did was listen and learn. We conducted a survey to all of our grantees to find out where they hurt. As my colleague Wynn Adkins of Teachers College liked to say, that whatever interventions we developed had to be based on the needs of the girls we were serving. We created a community helpline. We developed a COVID-19 action plan. We posted on our website. And we decided to take a very flexible approach to our funding so that the grants we were giving out to organizations had no priorities attached to them, where in a better year, they might be buying the time for buses to take kids to events or uniforms or something else. This, all bets were off. They could spend it as they needed to spend it. And so many of those organizations that serve girls, just changed everything that they were doing. Some of them became childcare centers for essential workers. Others served as food banks for the tremendous number of families that were food insecure. So the pandemic has an enormous impact on participation for all young people, and disproportionately for low-income families and girls of color. So we acted with everything we could to go virtual, and there were about 15 things we did, and we managed to keep so many of our girls engaged until they can gather again.
Yeah, general question: How did for all three of you, how did your students or players bounce back? Considering the athletes, hopefully, like I said before, athletes do have this, I think, have this sort of innate resilience. What did you see in your students or athletes?
Well, the biggest thing was the fact that I started to bring, to my students, I started to bring exercise back into their lives. Exercise and trying to be active, even if they were in that, in that small setting. And it was with many of them because they had started to really lose a lot of their fitness by the time we started school again last fall. It was just trying to find the time to do 5 minutes a day, just 5 minutes a day, some kind of an easy exercise that they can do at home, whether it's jumping jacks, jumping rope, jumping an invisible rope if they didn't have it, running, walking in place, to music, dancing, anything like that to just get them active, and to keep journals on this, and journals that they would, write down their activities. And doing calisthenics, if they were watching TV, I made a lot of them promise to do push-ups during commercials, or lunges and squats during commercials, little things like that. But it does make a big deal at the end. And just something along those lines. And for everyone out there, anytime you go to your refrigerator, make sure you do a few squats, and then you can take out snacks. That's the rule.
Similar to Ula, Juliet, I believe for us, it's strange. Usually you enter a postseason once your season is over, and that's continued training, much like your fall preseason. Then you enter summer, and in the Ivy League, typically our student athletes have internships. They're working. They might be living in New York City and training here, but they have so many other things going on. In that summer, as well as this future summer, a lot of those opportunities will be depleted just by nature of COVID and in-person opportunities. So I think that they did a great job pivoting. I would say I give tremendous credit to them. I'm always amazed by their resilience. Sometimes I feel like this is devastating, and I'm even holding on to it probably longer than they are. And then I look at them and they handle it gracefully, and they move on, and they figure out how to do it together. So I was really proud of them for how they responded and rebounded in the summertime. And one large part of that was, I think, just a realization of like, where am I really at in like a self examination, I guess. So, our staff, credit to them. They did a fantastic job at coming up with new ideas for programming. You know, this is something we've never had to think about because usually we don't really talk to them this much as a team during the summer. I mean, I've spoken to my players more than I think anybody wants to speak to me probably, and I love them all for it if they're listening, but, you know, I think that it was, you know, one major thing I would like to credit is, you know, our strength coach and I came up with this idea of like a daily accountability checklist. And so it would be, you know, Monday through Sunday. And essentially you go through and there's 5 just general sort of categories where you either did it or you didn't do it. But the fact is that you went and checked at the end of each day. And if you did, you got to like essentially invest in yourself in some way. And we tried to help them understand the value of delayed gratification and a long-term investment versus, you know, and so many kids these days are interested in like trading and stocks and all that stuff. So it's like, you know, helping them understand the value again of putting something into yourself that's going to pay off long-term. And that was more of just like a healthy lifestyle that had organization and structure. Because I think when the pandemic first hit, like everybody's walking around in their PJs, right? You're like watching TV to like all hours of the night because you can literally fall out of bed the next day and like no one cares, no one even sees you, right? So it was really just kind of getting them to understand how to self-start. And again, huge credit like to their resilience and, you know, willingness to rebound.
Do you think it helps? This question is for everyone. Do you think it helps or hurt that your students or players or athletes? Because on some level you think that it would be helpful, like, because I keep saying, and Megan has said that they are resilient, but on another level, you can't play your sport and you're stuck inside. Your teammates, you know, are across the country. Your coach keeps calling you. She's driving you crazy with these phone calls. You know, or are they more sensitive, you know, to being locked down? So is it being an athlete a positive or a negative during the pandemic, you think? And anybody could chime in.
I think it depends on who you are.
Yeah.
Sorry, right? I mean, it sounds like that was what kind of all of us would say. I'm sorry to take this one, but my mentality, and I think our athletes it's like what's right in front of you, and that's what you can control. And, you know, to linger on the past or really harp on it, we can reflect. Reflection is so powerful. But like the mindfulness of staying present is so powerful. And once the decisions are made, it's really out of our hands. So what you can control and really focus on that. So I would say, yes. I mean, Juliet, it has been tough. Like you watch basketball and like, it's hard to even turn on a game for our players. They see their friends playing. The kids down the street at Fordham are playing, right? Like in Manhattan College, they're playing, let alone across the country somewhere else. Right. So it's been difficult for sure. But I think, again, if you focus on what you can control, that's how we've been trying to approach all of this. Is in some way, this is going to make us better. And maybe we don't know it right now, but we have to believe that so that we can come back together and stronger.
I think what Megan said is spot on, that it depends on the person. And so it's not a straight across the board answer that I can give you, but I must say that a lot of my students, because I have classes that are not with my majors, but the classes that do have the exercise science and kinesiology majors, which also happens to be a lot of athletes, have tended to at least be seemingly more active. And I think that that's made a big difference in how they have viewed their school and, you know, and just their daily lives. So I think in a way it has made a difference on some levels. At least that's what I've seen.
Yeah, and we were especially interested in keeping girls engaged. And, you know, there were technology issues that, you know, there were obstacles to overcome. But with great thanks to our national partners, including Yahoo, Verizon, Gatorade, we really got very good at virtual learning. And there were many silver linings, which I think you both described as well, you know, that there are things that we've learned from this that will work on the long term. For example, I've talked before about our athlete ambassadors. They saved the day for us. We hosted a weekly series of Ask an Athlete, a series on Instagram Live, and, you know, including people like Meryl Davis or Jessica Long. It was just fascinating. And of course, athletes had the time to give to us for virtual programming, right? Because they're not competing. In fact, we did a live stream event with Condoleezza Rice, Billie Jean King, and it was called We Keep Playing. More than 500,000 families tuned in to watch that. More than 500,000. We could never have reached that many people conceivably in any other way. And afterwards, there were more than 4 million views of it. So it just reminds us that as we go forward post-pandemic, that there are ways to reach people beyond, having them in the room.
Should we be playing sports in a pandemic? Megan, your athletes are looking up the street like boredom.
Who's on this call? Yeah.
I mean, numbers are going down, but people are still dying from it. People are getting vaccinated, but people are still dying from it. In a couple of months, I'm supposed to go to the Olympics. So people are questioning whether, should we be having an Olympics, or, why is my daughter's friends playing in youth soccer leagues that are traveling to Florida right now to play? I wonder what your opinion is. I know everybody should answer this question.
Absolutely. It's very political right now. I feel that answering that question, either side of it for anybody, I feel like is a loaded question, because it's a moral issue, and it's also a governance issue. There's like a health issue. There's so many different things I think that go into it for people that make these decisions. I do believe we made the right decision in the league. I do believe that. I stand by the president's decision. I stand by our administration and everything they've been doing to try to get us to a healthy place. But I'm not at these other institutions where I know it does come down to economic decisions as well. So and not that that's right or wrong. It's just, I think that's the hard part about all this. There's so much going into it. But I do believe that our institutions made the right decision.
Yeah, when the Ivy League, stopped women's basketball and basketball in general, I thought that was the right decision at the time, only because of what we saw at that time with this big spike with cases and whatnot. I think also, I agree with Megan that this is a very political sort of area. It's hard to just sort of have one answer for everything. It's hard to also watch teams playing, and some leagues, as you've seen, have done it correctly in the sense of keeping things in a bubble. Others have opened it up a little more, and you've had cases actually in both. So what do we do, going on? I think the big changes are happening now. I think vaccinations are occurring. The vaccines are there. It's becoming more available to more people. So I think that as we start, by the time we get towards the summertime, I think there will be big changes. We're always safe as long as nobody around us has COVID. That's the whole thing. You just never know. That's the big unknown. And that's what makes it so, so questionable at times, because you can be really safe, but you may not be. And if it doesn't affect you, if it doesn't affect the younger people as much, or the cases aren't as bad, it's the families they go back to. That's the issue. The parents, the grandparents, and so forth, that really could cause some trouble. But I think we're on the upswing, so to speak, in a good way.
Yeah, I'm wondering, we have just a couple more minutes, and I have some questions that people have chatted to me. But Deborah, just one quick question about just the mental health of young people. The fact that a lot of youth sports did shut down, and just the necessity for kids who might be living, like you said, these underserved populations who might have, not any space to even do squats when you're in the, at your refrigerator or something. So how do you think it affected the mental health of the girls and young women that the Women's Sports Foundation serves?
I think we don't really know yet. I enjoyed talking with Ula the other day about what we don't know as this pandemic comes to a close, and what the damage is to girls who've been on the sidelines and not participating. Families with more resources are able to do more with their children, right? And families that are overstressed and under-resourced have less time, energy, and money to make opportunities available to their kids. So it needs to be studied, not just the academic losses that children will be having as a result of homeschooling, and again, where it's inequitable, but also by not having sport in their lives. We hope that we've captured many of them with simple ideas to do, even if you have 4 square feet of space at home to get, to squat while you're getting that ice cream out of the freezer. But we have a lot to learn from this.
We'll take a couple questions before we close. Let's see, trying to read these questions. Advances in pay equity for women, for athletes, was a hot topic in 2020, but the lag in pay between men and women still remains stark, with average NBA players earning $116,000, while average NBA players, of course, are earning $7.5 million. You have any thoughts on how to close that gap? I mean, that's quite a gap of $7,400,000. Anybody can answer that or try to answer that question. That's almost unanswerable in the time that we have, but if you could weigh in on it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Dr. Antoine, you might want to take this one. But...
yeah, Deborah.
Yeah, I referenced our research report on called the Equity Report, and it talks about the pay gaps, of course, and other, leadership opportunities, and what do we do to no longer chase equity, but to have it fully equitable. And so it doesn't mean equal pay; it means equitable pay. And we're seeing some advances. Most of us would say it's far too slow. But as we get more and more women in senior leadership positions, running sports organizations, at the table, making decisions, this will change much more quickly, I think.
This question could be answered in about 70 hours, maybe. It's a very tough one and a very good question. What is your opinion of President Biden's executive order on preventing and combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation? I'm quoting the question here, which permits any biological males to compete against biological females.
I mean, sports gives opportunities to everyone, as you know, but on this topic, I defer to you, Juliet, because you've done some research on this and you've actually written some articles along this line, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I've covered this for about 10 years, and I don't think this is such it's such an interesting question that we could talk about for days and days, because there's definitely a fine line between the people who think that women, I mean, it's all about what is a woman, right? How do you define a woman? And the International Olympic Committee has been trying to figure this out and trying to force that answer for decades, and they still haven't been able to do it. I know Dr. Antoine has a very strong opinion about this too. I mean, for me as a reporter, we report the news, and there's definitely a lot of gray areas for a lot of people. But Dr. Antoine, you might want to give your...
Well, I wouldn't say I have a strong opinion about it in particular, but I certainly believe that transgender girls are girls, and that the spirit of the executive order doesn't describe how it will happen to include transgender girls, but it does talk about how we have to provide inclusive ways of including people. And it's not just about accommodating. There's no parent of a transgender child who wants her child accommodated. You want your kid included. And we all know the very high suicide rates among transgender children. And the number of transgender girls that actually compete in sports is so tiny that to exclude them is, I think, painful. So from the perspective of the Women's Sports Foundation dealing with children, K through 12, we think that all girls have the right to play.
I think that's a great way to end the conversation. I mean, we've talked about just what a year it's been and how far we've come and what we've learned and what we've learned about ourselves and about ourselves as athletes and women. I think, it's been my pleasure to talk to each one of you. And I know that what I would like to hear just quickly from each one of you is just one positive takeaway from this pandemic that you're taking with you to this next year. Hopefully it won't be a year of a pandemic, but is there one positive thing that you could take away from the last 12 months? The number of spots you've done at the refrigerator.
Yeah, Julia, I'll start. I have a lot of positives. I think that this year I've tried to reframe and look at as a sabbatical and an opportunity more than a disadvantage. And I think you can, again, how you frame things in your mind, I think is so important. And I've been able to spend more time with my family and loved ones outside of my loved community at Columbia. I think of our players as daughters and their families as part of my family. I'd be a very young mother, but I think that honestly, I've gotten to spend more time with my family and watch my niece be born and grow up in these last 5 months. So that's been really a blessing to me. And then I would say for our program, honestly, we've had so many opportunities, much to what Dr. Antoine was saying about athletes had availability. People were around, people wanted to help. And it wasn't like you had to go looking or really paying for anything. It was people were offering their time. And I think as leaders and as people, as humans, that's the one thing we always have to give is our time. And I think that everybody honestly really got to think about that and realize that was really precious is how we spend it and who we spend it with. So I was really grateful for this opportunity. It's been a pleasure being on here with all of you. Thank you to Barnard and President Beilock and Virginia and Peter. But thank you again for including me in the conversation.
Okay, Dr. Antoine.
Well, I would ditto all of that, Megan. And what I would add to it is having been in the nonprofit leadership world for 45 years now, what I came through this pandemic with was a profound gratitude for the work of trustees who do this for nothing, who give their time and their energy, and they were all in on this. It started with one trustee putting up a very significant grant to say we are not laying off any people this year. And, but again, the wisdom, the work of our trustees, coupled with the work of my team. I mean, I have always appreciated each of them and the work they do, but to see them, and they're all athletes, you can imagine. It's not a requirement to get hired by the Women's Sports Foundation. It just happens to be that they're all athletes. But what a team and what a way to put everything, all your heart and soul into it for the benefit of children and families.
Personally, just the fact that we are at home, this sort of has enabled me just on a personal level to reach out to many friends that I had not reached out to before, because you sort of get stuck in your lives. And now you have that time at home. So that's been something that's been very positive. In terms of my teaching, I think I've learned a lot in terms of trying to include the type of workouts that students can do, the type of exercises that my students can do, the type of training that they may eventually do as personal trainers, as fitness professionals, could include doing things without equipment, that it's possible to stay in shape without equipment. And that's, even getting that across to students has been there's been a very, very positive response from that. And I think I've, you know, there's more connection. You know, Megan was talking about how she's so much more connected to some of her players. Same thing with our students, because we are talking to them online and they're emailing us constantly. There's that connection where we're going back and forth. And the students are learning a lot also just about movement. I think I've been able to reach out to all of my classes more about how important it is to stay active and move. And it also goes into their families, because they live with their families and sometimes they get their families to join in on the exercises. That's one of the things we've talked about a lot. And so I'm very glad that I think I've reached more people in terms of some of what I teach. And that's been very positive. And thank you so much for having us here. This really has been wonderful, to the panelists, to you, Juliet, and everyone that I mentioned at the beginning.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to the three of you panelists. It's my pleasure to connect with you. And the takeaway for me during this pandemic is I've been able to talk to so many people on Zoom that would maybe never have taken my calls beforehand. So I appreciate that. Appreciate your time. Of course, I appreciate Barnard and Columbia. You know, it's you know, like I said before, Columbia athletics means a lot to me as a person and a journalist. And to have this connection with everybody on the call really means so much to me during this really difficult year. And thank you. And hopefully we'll, wait a minute, President Beilock said we could meet here next year, but at Barnard. So no, I think she said that initially to us.
Face to face.
That was a secret.
Definitely face to face.
Dinner on Barnard, but we'll see. Hopefully, we'll see everybody next year, and everybody stay safe. And thank you to everybody. Good night.